Hey, do you enjoy photography? Are you interested by the stone chambers all through Putnam County? Do you like writing? Do you like art? Do you wonder what all those questions have to do with each other? Well, I'll tell you. My name is Vincent T, and our guest is the very interesting Renee Fleury from Fleury Studios. Renee, let's talk writing.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. We've crossed paths several times in all of those things. Your photography has interested me for a long time. I've seen you at a number of fairs and places with your photography. I know you have a great interest in the stone chambers, and I know you believe in the paranormal. We've been on investigations. When I was doing working on the sequel for George Denny, we went together to the murder scene. We went to the cemetery, and now you are doing a novel. The novel has to do with the stone chambers.
Yes, it does.
Has to do with paranormal. So talk to me. Who are you? What do you do? Who is Renee Fleury?
Well, first of all and foremost, I am a photographer. I love my camera.
There's our trusty purple camera.
My purple Pentax. Yeah, I love that thing.
Purple Pentax.
I have to be different, right?
Yeah, you are.
Well,
So
photographer with an interest in the paranormal and in history is certainly different. And not only do I do photography, but I run an organization, a nonprofit, dedicated to the research and preservation of the stone chambers in Putnam County, the rest of New York State, and most of America's Northeast. So
these stone chambers. Now, when you drive through Putnam County, you can't help but notice these cave-like structures throughout the county.
They're all over the place.
I've heard all sorts of things. There was a wonderful book put together by Martin Breck several years ago, and it covered the history of these stone chambers. But it admittedly said that there's controversy about what the history of these stone chambers actually is. What is the history of there? What are some of the beliefs about these stone chambers?
Well, you're right. There absolutely is controversy on who built them, how long ago, and why. And theories range anywhere from anywhere from colonial root cellars built by farmers to early Celtic explorers, and some people even think that aliens built them or had something to do with them. Now, of course, the alien theory piques my interest because of my love for the paranormal and the unknown, but my personal belief is that they were built by Celtic explorers. Now,
going back hundreds of years.
Even thousands.
Wow.
Of course, the proper answer is that nobody truly knows, and we may never know. But I think that's part of the great mystery about them, and I think that's the beauty of them, is that we may never know, and we can always debate. Now, the reason why I happen to think that they were built by the Celts is because I have been to England, and I've been to Ireland, and I have been inside and around similar-looking structures.
From there? Mm-hmm. Wow.
Now, the West Kennet Long Barrow is a great example of this. The Long Barrow, if this is in England, it's known to be 4,000 years old. It's enormous, and it's built in a relatively similar fashion. Now, probably the best chamber to compare it to here would be the King's Chamber.
And we've been to that chamber together.
Yes, we have. And the King's Chamber is beautiful. As a matter of fact, you were on my tour 2 Halloweens ago.
Yep.
And we had an interesting paranormal experience, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
You and your wife actually saw something interesting that only I thought was there, and I didn't think anybody else could see it.
Yeah, my wife grabbed my shoulder. She said, "Look, do you see that person out in the cave?" I said, no. Yes. And yeah, it was really strange. And
there was something behind me, and I didn't mention it to anybody else. So it was an unexpected event that...
Yeah. And that's not the first paranormal experience that we've experienced. I know that recently when I was doing the follow-up to Hauntings of the Hudson River, we went to Smalley's Inn. We went in the basement, Freaky. Because we went with a flashlight that was kind of set up, and that flashlight wasn't on. And it would take vibrations to turn that flashlight on. And there was a question that was driving me nuts. George Denny's sister was mentioned several times, but her name was never mentioned. And I wanted to find her name so I could find her grave. I turned to the light. You remember, I said, George, we need to know your sister's name. Can you help me? The light went on. They shook the flashlight, didn't go off. And then it finally went off. Spooky. Within 2 weeks, I had the sister's name. Now, want to call that coincidence? Call it anything you want. You know me. I don't believe in coincidence when it comes to the paranormal. Things happen for a reason. So that was a wild experience. So tell us, paranormal experiences. You've had more than that one. Tell us a little bit about that, your experiences with the paranormal.
Well, a lot of my experiences, more recently at least, have been around the stone chambers. And that is what led to me founding my organization, KEPRI, Celtic Energy Paranormal Research and Investigation. Now, not only are we an historical preservation and research group, we are paranormal investigators. And the reason why I think there is a direct correlation between the chambers and paranormal events is because anytime myself or multiple people that I've spoken to go into these things, some really strange occurrences tend to happen. Now, aside from the King's Chamber, I've had experiences on Mount Ninum. Now, Ninum Mountain is a beautiful place. It has a ton of history, as you know. And
now that's actually off of Gypsy Trail Road?
Yes, it is. It's a multiple use area owned by the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. They take excellent care of that place. And it has a lovely stone chamber there. It's my favorite, actually. And I've had, I think, more experiences on that mountain than I've had anywhere else, but that's because I can't stay away. I'm there at least once a week.
There's a strange aura.
There really is. Around the chamber is where I found that some of the strangest experiences I've ever had have taken place. For instance, I stayed the night a couple of times. And
stayed overnight in the chambers?
Yes, I did.
You're a lot more man than I am. There's no way I'd be staying in that chamber at night.
That's what a lot of people say. But it's not so bad. It's actually very peaceful inside of these. It's one of the best night's sleeps I've ever had. And I was with my best friend since first grade. And I trust this girl to be a witness. She never lied to me. But of course, she was not witness to this because she was fast asleep. When I woke up, it was around 3 in the morning. Because I know we went to bed around 1, and not long had passed. I woke up and there were flashing lights around me, and I know I was wide awake. This was not a dream. And I just kind of looked around.
Wasn't the police?
No, not this time. And it was within the chamber itself, and there was a very large, white light explosion, you could call it, at the back of this chamber, where a lot of people tend to say there's the highest amount of energy because they're built on magnetite deposits. And I looked around and I said, all right, would you knock it off? I'm trying to sleep.
And the spirits knocked it off?
And I guess I just kind of put my head back down within a few moments and went back to sleep.
Wow.
And I woke up the next morning. I was like, Alex, did you see that? And she was like, no, I slept wonderfully. I was like, oh, some help you are. So, of course, my witness was useless.
You are a very active member of the Mahopac Writers Group.
Yes, I am.
And we meet every week at the Mahopac Library. And you have shared chapters of a book you're working on. Now, this is a combination of fiction and nonfiction. Tell me a little bit about this book. First of all, the title is?
Set in Stone.
Set in Stone. And tell me about Set in Stone. What is this book? What is it about? It's a novel. And tell me, and it combines a lot of the things you said. Alien beings and supernatural and the chambers.
Of course.
Tell me about the book.
Well, Set in Stone is a novel based on true accounts. It's also right on the cover of the book. And I wouldn't be writing if it weren't for the chambers and if it weren't for my own experiences.
This is the cover of the book, yes?
Yes, it is, and that's me on the cover.
Yes, that certainly is. Now, you on the cover is not new.
No.
When I was doing my book, Return of the Cicada, I didn't know what to put on the cover. And I was very concerned about that. And what I wanted to do is to have a cover that was really going to set the mood. You gave me the photo that made it all work and helped me design the cover. So Set in Stone is a wonderful cover, by the way.
Thank you.
It's intriguing, pulls us to the book, but here is also your artwork. Return of the Cicada, and if you look at it very closely, there's a trademark about this cover. Look very closely at the young woman who is at the gravestone, and lo and behold, it's Renee Fleury.
That was actually by accident.
Yeah. Well, it was a good accident.
It worked out that way.
Because it created what I was trying to do. This book is an interesting book about a young girl who makes friends with people in the cemetery. And she has a very difficult time in school. Has fights with boys and girls, just can't get along. And she has some emotional issues. So she goes to the cemetery and she talks to the gravestones as if they were friends. Eventually, she meets the son of one of the people buried in the cemetery. And that boy happens to have AIDS. And he's come home to die. And she befriends him. And the two of them together help him earn the right to be buried with his mother and father. Interesting story, but I wanted a cover that was going to work. And this cover does work for me, thanks to you. So you do get that sense. You have that mood, and your artwork is amazing. In a number of your art pieces, you capture what's inside of you, the spirit, the aura. And your book does that. It absolutely did that for me. So sorry to interrupt. Let's go back to your book, and let's talk about that. So what is this book the story of?
This book is the story of the Stone Chambers and my organization. Basically based on my own research and loosely based on some paranormal experiences myself and friends of mine have had inside and around them. Now, the premise is, what if the stone chambers led to another world or to another time? Now, that sounds kind of silly or kind of spooky.
Not to me.
But there is a school of thought out there that the chambers may actually be portals to another dimension and possibly have something to do with time travel. Now, I've never gone through a portal to another dimension, so I wouldn't know. But I have had some very interesting experiences that make me question whether or not that's really true. So the characters in my book end up accessing these portals and they go back, but it's also the story of how they come to really gain an appreciation for these chambers and see them for more than just colonial sellers. And of course, in the end, it has a happy ending and the chambers get preserved.
Speaking of another school of thought, there are some people out there who worry a little bit. I'm going to be honest here. Worry a little bit about your going to these chambers and going in these woods and fear that you might be disrespecting the chambers. In truth, though, you really hold these chambers to be pretty sacred. Is that true?
I mean, absolutely.
So the fact that you might be there horsing around or making a mockery of these chambers?
I think that's actually very sad that people would think that of anybody who visits the stone chambers. And I know, unfortunately, there are a lot of people, there's a lot of vandals, a lot of silly kids who think it's okay. But I'm not one of those people. In fact, that's far
Good.
from the truth. The chambers to me are sacred ground. I think they're beautiful works of art, and the last thing I would want to do is lay a harmful hand on them. I treat them like my temples. These are places where I go to pray, to worship, to meditate in my own way. And to be disrespectful in any way, even to the little spiders that live inside of there, I think that's just one of the worst things you could possibly do, is to be
So
disrespectful
you're
on sacred
not
ground.
there to be sacrilegious. You're
Not
not
at
there
all.
to harm these chambers in any way.
I'm there to appreciate them, to have the deepest respect for them, and to just enjoy them.
Will this new book that you're doing help us to appreciate those chambers a little more?
I think it will. I think it's going to be an eye-opener. I hope, of course, I hope the book does well. I hope people really enjoy the characters that are in it. But more than that, I hope that they gain at least some of the appreciation and the respect for these beautiful places that I have, and they can see them in the way that I do, which is as just awesome.
All right, let's go back a little bit to Khepri. Now, what is Khepri? What does it mean again?
It's KEPRI, stands for Celtic Energy, Paranormal Research and Investigation. We are an historical group dedicated to the research and preservation
And
of
it's a
these chambers. It's an upcoming nonprofit. We haven't filled out all the paperwork yet, but we are getting there.
Okay.
We will be very soon. And we're also a group of dedicated paranormal investigators, and we take our paranormal investigation quite seriously, and we look at it through a very scientific lens. We don't want to go in fooling around. We certainly, of course, don't want to be disrespectful to any spirits that may be there.
Good.
So what Khepri does is, when we come across one of these places, we'll do some field research, take our notes, take what we find about these places back, and do a lot of research, compare them to places, let's say, on the other side of the ocean, such as the West Kennet Long Barrow. Like, I like to compare the King's Chamber and the Long Barrow because they are similar.
Now, there's something about these chambers that make them more than root cellars. Evidently, there's like a stone ceiling or something that...
Yes.
Tell me about that.
It's the way in which they're built. The term for the ceiling, it's known as corbelling. They're corbelled ceilings, so the stones almost seem to be layered on top of one another, and they're huge. These ceiling slabs are several tons
So the
each.
average farmer from the colonial days could not have lifted that whole thing. There was something more to it?
Yes, he could have, but it would have taken him a lot longer than the time that I would have thought that any farmer would have had, and people could say, oh, well, they were built during the winter. Well, you know, the farmers have other things to do, like taking care of their families and their animals during the winter. They don't have time to be building a stone chamber that's like quite a ways, I might add, from the farmhouse.
Yeah, and that's right. The location of these chambers. Now, the King's Chamber that we visited together, that's like at the top of a mountain. Why would a farmer build a root cellar at the top of the mountain? That doesn't seem to make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either, and it's the root cellar theory. I respect it, and everybody is entitled to their own opinion. It doesn't make much sense to me, so of course I choose not to believe it. Now, another thing that makes me think these are more than root cellars are the things I've seen in Ireland and England, and I've heard there are ones in even France and Scotland, and they're nearly identical in construction. The ones over there are just larger, and they're known to be 4,000 years old.
And they're built the same way?
Yes, they are.
Wow.
Just on a larger scale. They had more room, maybe more flat land. These things are built into hillsides. They're always near natural water sources.
And doesn't it have something to do with the sun, too?
Yes. As a matter of fact, a great example of that is the Winter Solstice Chamber. That's a beautiful, large chamber in Kent, and it gets its name for a very special reason. As the name suggests, every year on the winter solstice, the sun comes up, and it frames the rectangular doorway right at the back.
Wow.
And it's what we call a rectangle event. And there's a chamber nearby called the Mother Earth Chamber. That one actually has a solstice event, which I discovered by accident last year
Wow.
when I went there. And the Mount Ninum chamber has a similar event where the back lights up.
But no, there is a chamber on Mount Ninum that's not really a chamber. It's more like a bunker.
Oh, yes, in the parking lot.
Right, that's in the parking lot. So that's not to be confused with the actual chambers.
No, it's not. That, I believe, you said it was an ammunition bunker. You mentioned that in Hauntings, right?
Right. I actually have a picture of it in Hauntings.
The ammunition bunker was built, I think, to kind of blend in with the scenery and to look similar to the true chamber that's a little ways up the trail. But when you go in there, you have a stark difference. The outside, you can see, is clearly cemented, and the inside has cement walls, and it has steel beams on the top. So you don't have this corbelling of the ceiling, and you don't have that unique gently sloping walls that support the ceiling. And what's interesting is the ceiling and the walls support each other in the real chambers.
So just as this bunker may not be one of the original chambers, there might also be root cellars around Putnam County.
There are.
That people could get confused and say, hey, see, that's a root cellar. Well, maybe that is a root cellar, but that doesn't mean that there aren't chambers that could go back many, many, many years also in Putnam County. Now, there's more than one or two, right?
There's about 200 in Putnam County.
Whoa.
And they extend into Westchester and Dutchess. I think they may go as high up as Highland, although I'm not entirely certain on that. And they extend into 5 other states.
Wow.
So we have a lot here. A lot of people have made correlations to the Great Mounds in the Midwest, which are absolutely beautiful. They're Native American sites. The chambers, some people feel, are Native American sites, and I will agree that the Native Americans, the Wappingers who lived around here, did use them later on. Now, what I feel we have greatly overlooked is what's known in archaeology as relative dating. We've overlooked relative dating refers to looking at one artifact, which it can be an historical site, a building, and comparing it to another one, an unknown artifact. And if they look the same, you make the correlation and you say, oh, well, these must be built by the same culture, which places them around the same time period, hence relative dating. You're never going to get an exact dating because you can't do carbon-14 because there's no organic matter to extract the carbon from. So what I think is kind of silly is we have these 4,000-year-old structures in England with historical plaques in front of them saying they're 4,000 years old, and we have similar structures in New York and the rest of the Northeast. And we're not doing any relative dating there. We're not doing what archaeologists would normally do, and it kind of makes me crazy.
Yeah, I just spoke recently with one of our authors who said that there was a stone chamber nearby that's been destroyed. That is happening.
You can see the look on my face. Yeah.
Some of them are really just being torn apart to build buildings or do all sorts of other things, and that's a shame. It's
a real shame. Such a beautiful structure should never be. That's like destroying a Da Vinci, you know?
Studied.
They really should. And I don't agree with the people who are vandals who go in there and just dig up the floor and think they're going to find bones or an arrowhead. It doesn't work that way. And these things have been around so long that of course you're going to find colonial artifacts in them because they were used by colonial people. I just don't believe that they were built by them. Yeah. I think if you're ever going to find anything, look at the area around the stone chamber.
Yeah, and I know that you're not the only one who's studying these. There are historical societies that conduct tours to these. I encourage people to actually go to these places and to see them. You won't appreciate it till you've actually been inside one of these chambers and see how they're built. And the feeling that you get when you're there, there is a sort of it's really strange because it's a peaceful feeling at one moment and it's very tumultuous at another moment.
They're almost moody, aren't they?
Oh, they're beautiful. The King's Chamber was magnificent, huge,
and they
beautiful.
all have different personalities, if you will. Of course, they all look different, but they all feel a little bit different. But every chamber I've gone into and every person I brought into various chambers all have the same, exactly what you described, very peaceful, feeling very safe. But sometimes you go in there and it's like, it's just brimming with energy.
Now, your website What is your website again?
CelticEnergy.org, and that's Celtic with a K.
And there's photos in that website.
Yes, there are.
Of the chambers. So you can go to your website and look at some of those photos and see some of these beautiful chambers. Now, are the locations of those there as well? So that if people wanted to actually see a chamber, I know the one on Route 301 is pretty obvious. It's right there on the side of the road. I mean, you can't help it. Just before you get to Farmers Mill Road.
It's directly across.
On the left there. It's right there on the road. But there are others hidden across the countryside, or not hidden, but packed.
Hidden in plain sight is the way I like to put it. But it's true.
So those can be seen. Now, these chambers, many of them, are mentioned in your new novel.
Yes, they are.
And again, it's Set in Stone by Renee Fleury. How close are we to getting a copy of this? Is it just about done? Still in the editing and revising stage, or editing stage? Where are we with this book?
It was close to done, and then I went back and rewrote it in third person so I could add what I wanted to add in. So right now we're about halfway done. I expect it done by the end of the year.
Good.
If by chance it takes me a little longer, you should expect it January, February of next year.
Okay, so it's an interesting novel that incorporates the chambers into this fictional story of a young girl.
Yep, her name is Rhiannon Chamberlain. She is based on me, although of course she's not me. Sort of.
Yeah, well, I know that feeling exactly. Your characters kind of take the characteristics.
They have taken on the characteristics and the lives.
And some of your beliefs.
Yes, of myself and the people that I am closest to.
So when you're through with this book, hopefully people will get a sense of the chambers. They'll get a sense of the paranormal. I know you believe in that, and I know that I've had some weird experiences. We've even gone to George Denny's, Abraham Wanzer's cabin, where George Denny supposedly shot Abraham Wanzer, and that was a weird experience. We went with 2 other paranormals and investigated the site. Weird. So whether the paranormal exists or doesn't exist is kind of up to the listener, but as far as you're concerned,
it absolutely does exist. I've been around it my whole life.
That there is an afterlife. Well, speaking of afterlife, this book will have an afterlife from manuscript to a finished copy, which is exciting. Can't wait for the book to come out. I cannot thank you enough for being here with us on the show. I found it enlightening and interesting. I encourage you to check out those chambers, and I encourage you to stay tuned. Tune into us. Many interesting artists and writers scheduled for future shows. Renee, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
It has been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you for tuning in.